Welcome to The Word Shared, a podcast from the leaders of Worship and Preachers Trust and Preach Magazine. In this episode, I welcome two men who've been involved in research on artificial intelligence for Bible Society and are two of four signatories of a research paper entitled AI, Bible Apps and Theological Bias. Dr. Jonas Kurlberg has been teaching and researching in the area of theology and technology for almost a decade. He's the chair of the Global Network for Digital Theology and an honorary fellow at Durham University. So welcome, Jonas.
Thank
you. Dr. Zoltán Schwáb is an independent biblical theologian. His monograph on Genesis 2-3, The Wrong Tree, the Myth of Eden in the Age of Superintelligence, is due out later this year. So welcome, Zoltán.
Thank you.
So viewers will vary in their knowledge of artificial intelligence. Some may have switched off already, hopefully not. And obviously we'll shorten that to AI. Some will no doubt use it in their preparation for sermons and in other areas of their life. Others will be very ignorant and perhaps a little nervous about it. I've heard it described as a bit like Google, but it's also very unlike Google in many respects. So maybe you could give a few sentences to describe what AI does, how it relates to research for understanding, interpreting, and applying the Bible.
Sure. So maybe a comparison with a normal Google search, which I think most people are familiar with, is helpful. So Google search help you find different sources, mostly different websites online, and it uses algorithms based on various factors that would then list a number of websites. That's what you see. But what you find on these searches is actually material written by other humans. And so AI slightly differs in that sense, that it still searches the internet for data and information, but what it does is that it kind of summarizes that data and what you can find online to answer your questions or what you're looking for. And so you get a coherent kind of response of what you're looking for. And it does so based on statistical inferences. So it kind of gives you responses of what there's most data of. So the views that are most common is what it gives you. And it's normally quite good at this. In some ways, this kind of what we call generative AI is replacing Google and Google search, because I think most of you now seen that if you use Chrome, for example, which is the browser that most people use, you'll first get an AI generated response. And because they are normally quite good at giving us the response that we're looking for, or the answer that we're looking for, we stop going further down to look at the different website and different sources that it then goes on to list. So there are predictions saying that actually this kind of AI generated response is going to more and more replace the traditional Google search.
Sure. And that's, of course, got implications financially for how Google functions in terms of getting its money to benefit everyone and offering it free.
Yeah, you're right. And I suspect that just as, if you do a Google search now, partly on the list that you get is based on people paying for it to be high on the list. I wonder if this will be I don't know this for sure, but I wonder if that will be part of business model as well, that the AI generated responses will also be partly paid based on what people are willing to be paid for, them to be seen, their companies to be seen in these responses. But advertisement will still be part of Google, and you will still see advertisement if you do a Google search today.
Sure. Well, thanks, Jonas, for that. Your research looked at how 4 Bible apps responded to questions you asked, the kind of questions that might have provided background for research for a sermon. So why these particular 4 apps did you go for?
Yeah, so we noticed that there's already an increasing amount of apps or Bible apps that have chatbots inbuilt in them, or they even might say that they are specifically AI, generating AI responses to the Bible. And so we were curious about these. And essentially our selection criteria was just, what were some of the more downloaded apps on the particular Google's app store or Google Play. And so we looked at number of downloads but also number of positive reviews. And that's really why we've chosen these four. But there's a growing number of them out there already. And then we used, maybe I should say as well, we used ChatGTP as a kind of to test as well, just to give a kind of a different angle on these responses.
Sure. So you include a sentence in the report, which I think it might be worth highlighting. AI is for guidance and should not be seen as replacing peer-reviewed research. Perhaps you could explore the importance of that sentence.
Yeah, so actually, this is a reference to one of the apps and their website and what they recommend on the website. So in some ways, it's actually not our words,
Okay.
although that we don't wholly disagree.
Okay.
I guess as academics, also we know the limitations of scholarly work and peer reviewing processes as well. But I think one of the differences is that with an AI generated response, you don't really know where that response is coming from, what sources, what data has been used in order to generate that response. And whereas with the scholarly work, you can check that scholar out, you can see what their theological tradition is, what their cultural background is, and what their kind of general theological outlook is. And that kind of helps you to critically engage with that. And this is one of the things that we argue in the report, is that the problem with AI generated responses is because I think instinctively we feel like they are less biased in some ways, because they're just collecting, and giving the best possible answer. And so I think we can then turn off our critical analysis when it comes to AI because of that. And they are very convincing as well. I mean, the other thing to mention as well is that at least if you use AI on a basic level, you get very basic answers. And I think this is part of a wider kind of what we call the kind of technological mindset. So within technology, we create technology to solve certain issues or problems. And I think when it comes to interpreting the Bible through AI, is that there's this kind of a similar assumption that we come to the Bible to find a response, to find an answer, or find a solution. But in actual fact, in many cases, the Bible is a bit more complex than that. And AI responses tend to gloss over the contradictions, the difficulties in the passages that maybe a scholarly text might not. So there are different reasons why we might want to complement a kind of our AI responses, or using AI responses with scholarly works as well.
No, that's really helpful, Jonas. Thank you. So the report was concerned with how AI performed on a number of levels, and one of which was the fact that the methods of interpretation were not made explicit, which kind of ties into what you just said, Jonas. Can you explain why this is important?
Yes, so as you just said, it is related to what Jonas has just said. They very often say that when you interpret the Bible, you always have a perspective. You are always coming from somewhere. You make a lot of decisions when you are interpreting the Bible. Like you read Genesis 1. Do you understand it symbolically or literally? Or when you read the story of Mary, if you are a Catholic, you will read it differently than if you are a feminist. So the different decisions that we make when we read the Bible are dependent on our perspective. What kind of questions do you ask? What is your theological tradition? What are your presuppositions? So there is no such a thing as neutral, objective understanding of the Bible. Every interpreter is coming from somewhere, looking at the biblical text from some angle, which is fine. It's not a problem as long as we know what that angle is. Now, the trick is that many people think that this is different when a machine is doing the interpretation, that many people would think that surely that is the objective interpretation that software or machine is doing. Well, it is not. It is impossible to read the Bible from nowhere. Everyone, whether you are a machine or not.
Do you use AI in your church setting? Have you given thought to the ethical considerations of using artificial intelligence? If you'd like to understand artificial intelligence a little bit more, the ethics and practice of AI, the truth and authenticity of AI, and the limitations of sermons produced by AI, have a look at one of our previous issues of Preach magazine, AI and the Church, issue number 40. I've put it up on the screen, and if you'd like to have a go at reading more about how AI can be used ethically and safely within the church, please keep in contact with us at Preach magazine. To get your copy of AI in the Church, an issue about the use of AI, visit our website. If you are already a member, you can access it through the archive. And now, back to the conversation with Andy, Zoltán, and Jonas.
Now, those from an evangelical background might be pleased to hear that the interpretations of verses were mostly done from an evangelical perspective, certainly the ones that you used, especially the apps and obviously that are trained in that school. But your research was concerned that other traditions or approaches are not included. Perhaps you could explain and explore how you came to that view.
Yeah, so I think one of the interesting things is that we use ChatGPT as well as a kind of to test these questions as well. And we would argue that at least when we were using ChatGPT, which was April last year, we still saw this kind of evangelical leaning, although it was less obvious there. So I think the thing to recognize is that, again, it has to do with what data the models are trained on. And we know that most of the data that is online, is on the internet, is from America. So it's not very strange that we do get more evangelical leaning responses. So regardless of the developer, it depends on the training data, but you're right that the developers can also find what's called fine-tuned responses, so that the responses are given in certain ways to certain leanings on particular topics. So we did see that as well, which highlights kind of the power of the developer, and they have huge responsibility in this. But the reason why we kind of asking this question is also that we think that is even if you're evangelical, it's important to engage with other traditions. They might actually enrich in your own understanding or challenge your own presuppositions. So why am I thinking, why did they have this view of the Eucharist or this particular Bible verse? What is really my position? What are some of the arguments for that? Or what's the biblical evidence for that? So I think it's important to have that broader engagement for that reason. I think the other thing that I want to just highlight briefly is that not only did we see a kind of a leaning towards evangelicalism, but also to Western evangelicalism. And so I think there is a case to be made that there's in a global context now where Christianity is no longer a majority religion in the West, whereas in some parts of the world it is. That there are perspectives that people and brothers and sisters from other parts of the world that are important, and they see their Bible through their particular cultural lens and their particular situation. And again, that could be enriching as well.
Well, a bit more practical question, or if I like, good practice for those listening who are perhaps intending to plan or prepare a message coming up. What might help them as they perhaps are new to ChatGPT or any app, Bible app, and what do they need to be wary of? Some of the things we've discussed, I guess, will be part and parcel of that wariness, but there may be other things that you want to add.
Yeah, I suppose I would be concerned if preachers are simply asking ChatGPT to write their sermons.
Yes.
And my and the reason for that is that I don't think that ChatGPT would probably give you a good and coherent sermon,
Yes.
and probably fairly, theologically sound. But I guess my question would be: is preaching is it not more than just data, delivering data and information? And I would say there's something there about the person who delivers that. And that's what makes also a sermon convincing or not, is whether you can see that sermon has been embodied, reflected on, prayed over. And so, so that would be my kind of wariness around. And the other thing to think about is also what skills do we lose or gain through the use of AI? So, if you are just asking for quick answers all the time, you're not exercising your own mental capability, your own cognitive capabilities. And as well as, I think probably you'd be less inclined to prayerfully engage and wrestle with the message. So those are some of the kind of the things that just to think about and be wary of. How is it shaping the preacher as well in the formative kind of questions?
Sure.
But I think there are a few ways that you can consider using AI. And one is as a kind of a critical friend. So what you could do, you've written your sermon, you could then ask an AI model for critique. How can I strengthen this? Is it coherent? Or maybe you could ask for illustrations or things like that. And what's happening as well, just my final point on this, is that it can help you. So increasingly we'll see, and I know that there are being developed specific preaching apps that will also help you find good sources. And so if you want to know what, I don't know, someone like N.T. Wright thinks about something, you can ask them to summarize, but also to point to sources. So you'll also get a text where N.T. Wright speaks about some aspect of eschatology, for example. And so I think those are some of the ways that might be useful. And also maybe just also to polish up language, I think is a legitimate use of AI.
Sure. No, that's enormously helpful. Thank you. And yeah, again, for those very ignorant, something like Chat GPT, Chat CHAT, capital GPT, just type that into Google and it will give you free access so that you can then ask the questions you want to ask. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so there are some ethical considerations to be made here as well, which model you use.
Okay.
And I personally would say that OpenAI, who has ChatGPT, is kind of moving in the wrong direction in terms of ethics.
No,
so, there are lots
of
other models to use, like Claude is pretty good. Gemini, which is Google's, it's kind of in between, but it's just to be aware of that as well.
Okay, splendid. Well, gentlemen, much appreciated. This will be an eye-opener for many listening. And for those who are a little bit using this, you've given us some cautions as well and some insights. So thank you so much for all that you've shared on this recording. Much appreciated. So thank you to Jonas and thank you to Zoltán.
Thank you, Andy.